I was staring at a ruler on my desk this morning. Just a simple wooden ruler.
Uh-oh.
And it triggered one of those, those existential spirals I go down before we record.
Yeah, of course. Only you could have an existential crisis over, what, some office supplies.
No, but seriously, think about it. We trust that ruler.
Yeah.
We assume an inch is an inch.
Right.
But what if it's warped? What if my ruler is actually, 11.5 inches long, but it's marked as 12? If I try to build a bookshelf with it, the whole thing's going to be crooked. If I build a house with it,
Roof caves in.
Exactly.
That is actually a perfect setup for today. We're not just talking about carpentry, are we? We're talking about the ultimate calibration problem.
What is right?
How do we distinguish truth from falsehood?
Exactly. In a world where everyone seems to have their own truth, their own personal ruler, how do we know whose is actually accurate?
Yeah.
Today's deep dive is tackling a set of source materials that claims to solve that exact problem. We are looking at the Qur'an.
But, and this is really the key thing, we aren't just looking at it as a history book or something to recite. The source material today presents the text as a technical instrument.
A divine measure.
A scale.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to sort of reverse engineer that claim. We want to unpack the internal logic of the text itself. How does it argue for its own authority? Why does it claim human reason just isn't enough? And what even is this concept of calibration when you're talking about the human soul?
It's a fascinating argument. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it tries to move the conversation away from blind faith and more towards systematic necessity.
What do you mean?
Well, the text basically argues that without an external fixed standard, humanity is just guessing. We're all using warped rulers.
So, okay, let's jump right into the machinery of this. The source material starts with a pretty heavy concept, the corruption of the measure.
This is the problem statement. The source asserts that when the measure is corrupted, justice is corrupted.
It brings up this metaphor of the mizan, or the scale. And I want to really paint this picture for everyone listening.
Go for it.
Imagine an old school marketplace. You're buying grain, or maybe gold.
Right. And the merchant places a little metal weight on one side of the scale and your gold on the other.
Yeah. But what if that weight, the standard, has been shaved down? Or if the scale itself is just a little bit unbalanced?
The transaction is doomed from the start. It's fundamentally unjust.
And here's the kicker from the source. It doesn't matter if the merchant is a nice guy.
Nope.
It doesn't matter if he smiles and asks about your family. It doesn't matter if you feel like it was a fair deal. If the instrument is wrong, injustice has happened. Period.
Exactly. And the source argues that this is the state of humanity without a divine guide. We're all using warped rulers.
We calibrate our sense of justice or morality based on what?
What social trends?
Yeah.
What our parents taught us? What some politician says?
And those things change constantly. What was considered moral 200 years ago might be barbaric today, and vice versa. The ruler just keeps shrinking and expanding.
Which leads right to the source's main solution. It introduces the Qur'an as the Furqan.
The criterion.
Yes. The standard kilogram against which all other weights have to be checked.
The factory standard. And the source makes a really interesting distinction about the scope here. It says this isn't just a rule book for, one specific tribe in the desert.
No, it claims to be a mercy to all worlds.
And a guide for, and I love this little detail, humans and jinn.
That is a massive claim. For anyone not familiar, in Islamic theology, jinn are these unseen beings who, like us, have free will.
So by including them, the text is zooming out as far as it possibly can.
It's saying, I am the standard for all consciousness.
Right.
It's setting the stage for a universal constant.
Okay. But I have to. Let me play the skeptic here for a second.
Please do.
History is literally littered with books that claim to be the ultimate truth. And what happens?
Time happens.
Yeah. Pages get torn, languages die out, scribes make typos, or, some king rewrites a few verses to justify a war. How does this source address the fragility of just paper and ink? Because if your standard ruler gets warped by the sun, it's useless.
That is the pivotal question.
Yeah.
A measure is only good if it's immutable. Right?
If it can't be changed.
Exactly. If the standard kilogram in France suddenly changes weight, physics breaks. The source material addresses this head-on with a specific verse. Surah Al-Hijr, verse 9.
I have that right here. It says, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the reminder, and indeed, we will be its guardian."
We will be its guardian. The analysis in our sources really emphasizes that this is a unique kind of clause. The text is asserting that the protection of this data, It isn't outsourced.
It's not like, here's the book, good luck, try not to mess it up.
Precisely. In other scriptural traditions, the preservation was often left to, scholars or rabbis or monks.
Yeah.
And history shows us that human error or bias, it creeps in. Here, the source argues the author Allah has personally undertaken the security of the text.
So it's an active, ongoing process. It's not just a book sitting on a shelf. It's like a protected file.
Think of it like a read-only file on a server, where only the admin has right access.
Wow.
You can read it, you can copy it, but you cannot alter the source code. The source argues this guarantees protection from human interference, distortion, or any kind of arbitrary alteration.
The notes describe it as a truth that never fades, a message that never ages.
And that's the crucial link back to the measure metaphor. The text is arguing that if humans can edit the measure, then the measure is subject to human bias.
It becomes another warped ruler.
But if the measure is protected by the divine, it remains objective. It's the only ruler in the room that doesn't warp.
Okay, so we've established the what it claims to be the standard and the how it claims to be protected. But now I really want to get to the why. And this is the part that I think really challenges the modern mindset.
The creator versus the created.
Right. Because look, humans are smart. We split the atom, we put a rover on Mars, we built the internet.
We did.
Why can't we just figure out a moral code on our own? Why do we need a divine measure to tell us how to live?
This is where the source material gets very philosophical. It actually acknowledges that human reason is powerful. It doesn't deny science or intellect at all.
Rux.
But it argues that reason has let's call it a field of view problem.
Oh, like a flashlight in a huge dark warehouse.
That's a perfect analogy. A
Yeah.
flashlight is great. It shows you exactly what is in the beam. You can analyze that object perfectly,
Right.
but it doesn't tell you what's in the dark corners or what's behind you or what the warehouse was even built for in the first place.
The source points to Surah Al-Mulk, verse 14, for this. It asks this question. Does he who created not know, while he is the subtle, the all-aware?
That word subtle, it's a translation of al-latif,
Yeah.
and it's a very heavy word.
It doesn't just mean quiet.
No, not at all. It implies knowledge of the finest, most microscopic intricacies, the hidden wiring.
So it's the difference between looking at a car and saying, that's a red car, versus being the engineer who actually designed the fuel injection system.
Correct. This is the manufacturer argument.
Yeah.
If you buy a highly complex machine and the human being is infinitely more complex than any machine,
For sure.
and it starts malfunctioning, who is the ultimate authority on how to fix it?
The one who built it, the manufacturer.
You might have a mechanic who has a good hunch. You might have a philosopher who has a nice theory. But only the manufacturer possesses the actual blueprints.
So the source argues that the one who created mankind knows its weaknesses, its needs, its tipping points, better than mankind understands itself.
Way better.
That's a humbling thought, isn't it? We like to think we are the masters of our own destiny.
We do.
But the text is saying, no, you have massive blind spots, we have emotional biases, we have limited lifespans, we can't see the consequences of our actions 3 generations down the line.
Exactly. So when the text says it guides to that which is most upright, and that's a reference to Surah Al-Isra, verse 9, it's not saying this is a pretty good option among many.
What's it say?
It's saying this is the factory setting.
The factory setting. I like that. It implies that if you try to run the human machine on a different operating system, one made by some guy who is just guessing, you're going to get glitches.
You get system crashes, you get anxiety, you get societal collapse. The argument is that although it didn't just leave humanity in the dark to bump into the furniture for eternity, he sent a manual.
Which transitions us perfectly to the practical side of this, because a manual is useless if you don't read it.
Or worse, if you don't follow the instructions.
Right. The source material really emphasizes that this isn't just a book to be recited for good luck. It's meant to be lived.
This is the application phase. It is about taking that divine measure and physically laying it against your life day by day.
And the source uses a very strong visual for this. From Surah Al-Aram, verse 153, it mentions a straight path.
The verse says, "And indeed, this is my straight path, so follow it, and do not follow other ways, for you will be separated from his way."
I'm just visualizing that. One clear straight line. And then branching off from it, all these splintering little paths shooting off into the woods.
It challenges that modern idea that all roads lead to Rome, doesn't it?
It really does.
In this context, truth isn't some multiple choice question where D, all of the above, is the right answer.
It's binary. You're either on the path or you're separating from it.
And think about the navigation analogy. If you were trying to get to a specific destination, there is an optimal route. If you decide to take a scenic detour just based on your own whims, you aren't just taking a different road, you are physically moving away from the goal.
Separated from his way. That implies isolation. It implies getting lost.
And to prevent that getting lost, the source material adds another layer to the imagery. It introduces the metaphor of the unbreakable rope.
The rope of Allah, Haballah.
Yes, it describes the Qur'an not just as a map, but as a lifeline. Imagine someone dangling over a cliff or drowning in rough seas. The text is the rope thrown down to you.
That raises the stakes significantly. A map is something you consult when you're confused.
Right.
A rope is something you have to hold on to with a death grip if you don't want to fall.
That's the active participation we were talking about. The
Yeah.
condition is whoever holds on to it will not fall.
But that implies that life is naturally precarious.
So we're prone to slipping, we're prone to confusion, despair, or moral ambiguity. The text presents itself as the stability in all that chaos.
And there's a psychological payoff mentioned here too, right? Because I think a lot of people see religious rules as just restrictions, don't do this, don't do that. But the source mentions a specific result for the person who actually grabs that rope.
Yes, Surah Taha, verse 123. So whoever follows my guidance will neither go astray nor suffer.
Nor suffer. Now, hold on. That is a massive promise. Does that mean if I follow the Qur'an, I'll never get the flu? Or a flat tire?
No, and the source is very careful to clarify that. It doesn't mean a life free of physical pain or external difficulty. I mean, historically, the prophets themselves had incredibly difficult lives.
So what kind of suffering is it talking about?
It links this to peace in the heart. The suffering mentioned here is often interpreted as shaka, which is like misery, spiritual wretchedness. It's the suffering of being lost.
The existential angst.
Exactly. The anxiety of not knowing your purpose, the internal conflict of, cognitive dissonance where you're doing one thing, but your soul feels like it should be doing another.
That makes a lot of sense. There's specific kind of deep stress that comes from not knowing if you're doing the right thing. It's a heavy burden to constantly invent your own morality every single morning.
It is exhausting. And the source argues that when you align with this divine measure, that friction just disappears.
How?
You've outsourced the burden of defining truth to the one who actually knows truth. You might still have a bad day at work, but you don't have a bad life because your internal compass is magnetized to true north.
It's the difference between walking through a storm knowing exactly where your house is versus walking through a storm with no idea where you are. The storm is the same.
But the suffering is totally different.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It is the mercy of clarity. In a confusing world, clarity is maybe the greatest mercy of all. And it's not a lonely walk, is it? The source mentions a community aspect to this.
Right. Surah An-Nisa, verse 69, he says, and whoever obeys Allah and the messenger, those will be with the ones upon whom Allah has bestowed favor.
So it connects you to a lineage. You aren't just some solitary person with a book. You're joining the same path as the prophets, the truthful ones, the martyrs.
It reframes the straight path. It's not some restrictive, narrow alleyway. It becomes the main highway of human success, populated by the best of humanity.
Looking back at all these points, the scale, the protection, the manufacturer's knowledge, the rope, what really stands out to me is this concept of return. Well, the source notes that whenever a person wishes to reform themselves, they find the way the moment they return to this protected measure. It sounds like the door is always open.
That is a crucial takeaway. Because the measure is protected. Remember part 2? It hasn't moved. If you drift away for 10 years and decide to come back, the rope is hanging in the exact same place you left it.
It hasn't frayed. The scale hasn't been recalibrated by society while you were gone.
Right. If the standard kept changing, you could never catch up. You'd come back and say, wait, the rules are different now.
Right.
But because it's eternal, you're never truly lost. You're just temporarily disconnected.
The calibration tool is just waiting for you to pick it up again.
It is.
That's surprisingly optimistic. You'd think a text about divine judgment and measures would be terrifying, but the source frames the very existence of the standard as a kindness.
It allows for confidence. Success, true success, according to the text, is defined by submitting one's personal, subjective measure to that absolute divine measure.
So to wrap this up for our listener, we've really tried to reverse engineer this idea of the divine measure. We've seen the claim that the Qur'an is the uncorrupted truth, guarded by the author, designed by the manufacturer to fit the human machine, and it acts as a lifeline for the user.
It's a very cohesive internal argument. It challenges the reader to not just read, but to weigh, to measure their own life against the text.
It really forces you to audit your own life. We all have a ruler we use. Maybe it's social approval. How many likes did I get?
Or financial, what's my net worth?
Or maybe it's just whatever makes me feel happy in this moment.
And that really is the provocative thought to leave everyone with. If our perception of justice or success or truth depends on the ruler we use to measure it, and if all our human rulers are inherently flexible, limited, or prone to breaking, then can you ever really be sure of anything?
And if everyone in a society is using a different ruler, can you ever really build anything meaningful together?
Or does the house just inevitably collapse because the foundation is uneven?
That is something to chew on. Whether you view the source material as scripture or just a fascinating philosophical argument, the question of what is your measure is one we all have to answer.
Indeed. We cannot escape the scale.
Thank you so much for walking us through this. It's been a heavy topic, but a really necessary one.
Always a pleasure to explore these foundations.
And to you, our listener, thanks for diving deep with us. Check your calibration, hold tight to the rope, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.